Shall we start with the Nations League fixtures? I want to talk about France, Spain and Portugal in this little section. Shall we start with France? JJ, how is their, I suppose, imperious performance at the San Siro regarded back in France where you are?
Well, I think that the only suitable starting place for this episode can be sort of my surroundings right here in the car. Snowing outside. It's certainly not typically French weather. And the funny backstory to all of this is I'm actually at PSG's new, brand spanking new training facility in Poissy. It's the inauguration today. And because of the inclement weather and some changes to the planning, I've been unfortunately demoted from the position that I would have had in the media room. So I'm doing this from the comforts of the car, as any true dedicated journalist would do. And that is the snow that's been falling for the last hour and a half that you can see accumulating on the window in the background just there.
What did we say about after the France-Israel game about hell will freeze over before France win at the San Siro? Well, got a bit of both.
I mean, is Paris really regarded as hell? I mean, Poissy, you could make a case for. But Paris, I'm not sure about. But yeah, it is very inclement to say it politely.
But it was a good performance at the San Siro, though.
It was a very interesting performance at the San Siro as well, because I think you're now starting to see new elements of what could potentially be the future team for France, really coming to the fore when you've got Luc Edin starting to translate that form that he's shown for Villa under Unai Emery into international level, which puts a bit of pressure on Théo Hernandez, which I think many people have kind of anticipated could be coming for a while. You've got Adrien Rabiot now starting to make up some of that ground, having lost a bit of fitness, being without a club for a few months while the season was getting underway, starting to find his feet with Marseille, but also getting back into the swing of things with France. I wouldn't say that it's all been, completely perfect. I think up front there's still major questions. Neither Randall Colomwani nor Marcus Thuram really worked this international break. But the one really strong positive, I think, for Didier Deschamps, aside from the fact that they obviously finished top of the group thanks to that victory against Italy, is the way that the defence is now set up. I think that Konate and Saliba is a very, very complementary central defensive pairing in front of Mike Maignan. And Jules Koundé has made the right back spot his own. So I think if you can, work out who would really be the first choice between this sort of Luc Edin in this sort of form where he got 2 assists and, essentially scored the free kick goal as well, or Hernandez, I think that could be a really, really good looking back four, with a bit of attacking impetus as well, because whether you've got Dean or whether you've got Hernandez going forward from the left, that really does give you an outlet. I just feel that Dean at this moment in time, especially when you're looking to serve, people aerially by putting the ball in, whether it's from set pieces, whether it's from crosses, is a bit more of a better and more consistent threat than Hernandez is.
It's quite something, though, Andy, that France beat Italy at the San Siro 3-1, and there are still some question marks around this French team.
Well, I guess the whole point of the Nations League, as we've seen across a few of the other nations that we're going to go through, it's sort of a forum to workshop ideas as well, really. So it's something that you want to try and win, particularly once you get into the final 8 and the final 4. But as well, what other opportunity of international coaches in at least semi-competitive games got an opportunity to try things out? It's very difficult. I think with France, they needed some sort of reaction to the Israel game, because on and off the pitch, it was a real low point. You think 16,000 turned up in the Stade de France. It looked empty, and it was a miserable performance. It was quite a heavy political context to it off the pitch, of course, as well. And for that reason, I guess there needed to be some sort of reaction. Now, what JJ was saying about there being new elements emerging in this, I think is really interesting, because I think for a while now, you've looked at, and certainly going into the Euros at the start of the summer, you look at England and France being sort of almost neck and neck, having similar qualities, similar problems perhaps, similarly, certainly going into the Euros, quite conservative coaches who think there's a certain way to win an international tournament. And, in the case of one of them, he knows. But I think now you've sort of got this situation where if you'd have seen, say, England's first choice team now, and even the England team that played against the Republic of Ireland, and the France team that took the field against San Siro, you think, yeah, maybe there's a bit of a gap emerging for the first time, with England having the upper hand in that. And I think in terms of us projecting forward to the World Cup in 2026, that's quite interesting. But even though, and I think, JJ talked about, the challenges that they've still got up front, which I think are quite right. The defence settling down, and Mike Maignan, of course, is a huge part of that as well. The midfield, you looked at that, I think, for the game against Italy at San Siro, and you think, are they winning anything with this midfield? But actually, the midfield was fantastic. Not just, as JJ said, because Rabiot's come back to form, which is really important. But Manu Kone was absolutely outstanding, really good. And he's come from a situation, he's come from a context at Borussia Mönchengladbach, where he's a fine young player who a lot of big clubs are interested in, but he's in this sort of transitional team, so there's a limit to how much he can shine. He thinks by signing for Roma, okay, here's a team that's a bit higher up the European food chain. We're building something great. He's on coach number 3 of the season. But still, he manages to produce regularly in Serie A already. He's looked really, really good so far this season. And the fact that he can produce these sort of performances when there's all this chaos going on around him, firstly at Roma and to a lesser extent with France, because right up until the point that they win at San Siro, everyone's just talking about Mbappe, and that at least dampens that chat a little bit, which must be a little bit of a relief to Didier Deschamps. I think that really marks Manu Kone out as not just one for the future, but one for now.
Is there an argument, JJ, though, that even though France have been impressive, and certainly at the San Siro, that the rest of Europe, the other teams that they went into the Euros with, for example, against, have caught up with them? Because when they went into the Euros, they were coming off the back of the World Cup, and everybody thought, well, France is the team to compete against. But arguably Spain surpassed them. Not arguably, definitely surpassed them in the Euros. And I wonder whether the Spanish team that we see now in these Nations League games is the equivalent of France and matches. I mean, arguably the Portuguese team as well.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there are a few mitigating circumstances, certainly Kylian Mbappe's situation, but we'll get on to that in a minute. I do think that there has been sort of a closing of the divide between some of those sort of challenging nations in terms of reaching the same level that France have been at over the last few years. I certainly think that gap is much smaller now, if there is any gap at all. I mean, Spain being the Euro champions, and you look at their success in other categories and age groups as well over the summer, it's been a very, very good last few months for Spanish football internationally. But I do think really, when you look at this France side and you look at some of the names that are still missing, not just Mbappe, but also the likes of Tchouaméni, obviously Griezmann's retirement is still fresh as well. You've got Lucas Hernandez to come back in the defence as well. There is still a lot of talent in that French team, and the feeling is it's not necessarily that there isn't quite the talent to construct a winning team. It's that the kind of chemistry, the collective mentality needs rebuilding, in the way that it was built up ahead of the success in 2018. Whether that's possible between now and 2026 under Didier Deschamps, only time will tell. But it does look like there are some potentially important building blocks in place for, whichever cycle it might be, 2026, 2028 or beyond. But I don't necessarily think that French football is in crisis. I do think that Mbappe coming back and that situation being sorted out, whether it remains, with him as the captain of the team, we'll have to wait and see. I know that there's been reports that Deschamps and Mbappe will meet to discuss the captain's armband in the very near future. Be interesting to know what comes out of that. But I do think that if you put a fit and inform Mbappe back into this team, it can be a lot more dangerous and more of a contender. So while the gap definitely has been shortened, by the likes of England, Spain, Germany, I do still think that France are, a strong proposition and one to be reckoned with, and a team that not many people want to draw in the World Cup qualifiers when that draw is made in December.
I guess that's it. Chemistry is the key word, really, isn't it, here, Dotun? And Spain, as you've said, have almost hit a high watermark for that, for the second time in a couple of generations, really, because I think you still look at that Spanish team. I still look at that Spanish team, and I think player for player, to say that they're the best team in Europe, let alone the world, feels like a bit of a stretch to me. It's a similar vibe to Italy coming out of 2021, really. There's still a sense of, okay, they've won a trophy by having an exceptional tournament, but this is still a team in development. Of course, a team should always be in development. We realise that. But I think what they've managed to do in this international break, you look at the win in Denmark and then the home win against Switzerland in Tenerife with a very different team. It feels like, we're talking about workshopping in the Nations League. They have taken that to the letter, really. And Luis de la Fuente is that kind of coach, which I think really, really helps as well. Now, how that affects them in terms of being a team that's one of the favourites and defending a title, I think is an interesting question. Of course, Nations League holders, so this is a fairly big deal to them as well, going into the next internationals in March. But I think you look at the fact that they're never stopping developing. And of course, part of that is informed by the situation of the biggest clubs in the country, and particularly Barcelona at the moment. So we've seen Marc Casado come in and obviously assimilate perfectly immediately, because that's exactly what he did for Barcelona. He's looked terrific already. They go into the game in Tenerife against Switzerland with a very new defence, which produces some slightly uneven results. They change a goalkeeper at half-time, bring in Ramiro at half-time, and move things about a little bit there. But you get into the whole second half, and the Samu plays for the whole second half. He's had a great start to the season at Porto, and there's always been this feeling. Morata is a key player for them. He's a captain. He's important. He's a multifaceted striker. He's not consistent, and he's never going to be consistent at this point in time, is he? So for them to have a very different sort of striker that is threatening to become a superstar, I mean, that's an interesting little twist to what they can already do.
You see, Spain have got all these new players coming through, JJ. And the one thing I would say is, you would expect them, if this was France, you would expect them, the coach, to put an arm around these players and protect them and so on. But Spain seems to be confident enough that, look, there are others where that came from.
Yeah, and I think that's what many people have thought of France. For the last few years, they're looking at France across all the positions, arguably with the exception of right back, thinking, where do they keep churning these guys out from? It's almost like a never-ending conveyor belt of talent. And I think, France have maybe, I'm not going to say run dry in certain areas, but there are one or two sort of thin patches in the squad. We mentioned sort of the striker situation when Mbappe is not there at this moment in time, which kind of looks a bit iffy, especially when you bear in mind that Randall Colomwani gets next to no minutes at club level, yet, gets expected to play both sets of 90 minutes at international level when he joins up with the French national team. But I think when you're looking at the Spanish side and, this young England side as well, there are now nations who are starting to produce the same quality of young talent that France have been sort of associated with being the kings of, for quite some time. And now that you've got a power like Spain that's threatening to almost do it better than France has, with its kind of next crop of talent, I do think that sort of throws down the gauntlet, to France to really show how strong it can be ahead of the 2026 World Cup. But I also think it exacerbates the frustrations with Didier Deschamps, because, a lot of people in France, journalists, supporters alike, feel that, he's now sort of acting as kind of like the handbrake for this team, and that they could perform more convincingly, if there was somebody who took a few more risks in charge, hint, hint. Zinedine Zidane. So, I do think that while there is very, very clearly, some quality young elements coming through in a number of these different national teams, it's not exactly like France are sort of running low on talent themselves. It's more a question of, has Deschamps taken this team as far as he can? And, does it need potentially new impetus in order to drive them towards being able to compete at the same level as a Spain in 2026?
Makes me laugh that every single time we talk about France, the question is, has Deschamps taken his team as far as he can? As far as he's concerned, no, I haven't. But what about...
It's obviously a very comfy seat in his office.
Yeah, of course. What about Spain's Iberian neighbours, Portugal? A very different perspective from Roberto Martinez, the coach there, about, what you were saying a moment or two ago, Andy, about, using... the Nations League to try out new talent, to work out a template and so on, because he trusts in the veterans, doesn't he? He's not convinced about the youngers.
Yeah, because we did see, of course, in this international break, Cristiano Ronaldo getting up to 135 international goals.
It's amazing.
He's going to be 40 in February, and at this point, it would be a major surprise if he didn't play at the 2026 World Cup. I feel that he's gone into that realm now.
And he'll be 41 then,
yes, now
bonkers.
And a half nearly.
Yeah.
Now, of course, he did sort of semi-tease the prospect of a retirement in 1 or 2 years after the Poland game in which he scored twice. But I'll believe it when I see it. I think the interesting thing is in this set of international games, it felt like Portugal, and certainly in the first game against Poland, and it's a poor Poland side at the moment, I think it's fair to say. They sort of underlined the fact that having Ronaldo in the 11 doesn't necessarily have to be a handbrake on them playing good football. On the other hand, the question over Martinez is he someone who can really develop? Now, we've seen, on the other hand, with De La Fuente, he is a coach who's never going to stop developing a team. Whereas both with the team he picked against Poland and after he sent a load of those players home to get rest for the second game against Croatia in Split, he didn't really seem to want to go all in on bringing up the next generation to speed. So, for example, we have Giovanni Kenda, the young Sporting wing-back, only 17 years old. Now, he's been a key player for Ruben Amorim. Ruben Amorim, it seems, is interested in bringing him to Manchester United. And everyone's expecting him to become Portugal's youngest senior international. So they go to Croatia on Monday night. They make the subs. Giovanni doesn't come on. And Portuguese football society is frothing about it. I mean, he would have beaten Paulo Futre to become the youngest senior player in the history of Portugal. And he didn't bring him on. And it's like, well, what are you waiting for? Won the group by a mile anyway. Protecting a draw away to Croatia? Really? Is that where we're at? So I guess when it comes to making those decisions, it's a little bit like some of the decisions he made in terms of in-game management during the Euros. Is he brave enough to help this talented team really fly?